Hi, and welcome everybody to today's webinar on the topic of what happens in the OR shouldn't stay in the OR, sharing best practices before, during, and after an organ recovery. My name is Kathi Steele, and I'm part of the Alliance team, and we welcome you to today's webinar. Just before we get started, if you're new to being on these types of webinars, and we do record the webinar, so all the lines will remain muted. If you have questions for the speakers, you can submit them at any time throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait till the end. And you would use the bottom left-hand corner, little chat icon right there. Just click on that and type in your question, and then we will reserve it for the end of the presentation. Also, I wanted to share coming up on August 22nd, registration is open right now for our next transplant-focused webinar, and this is going to be on the topic of what is the bug, current infectious diseases, and a risk to transplantation. It's going to be a really great webinar by Dr. Cameron Wolfe, so I highly recommend registering for that webinar. For today's webinar, we are offering 1 CEP-C credit, and also we are offering 1.2 nursing contact hours courtesy of Iowa Donor Network. And so everybody who's listening to this webinar can submit for continuing education credits or a certificate of attendance. All you have to do is complete the evaluation that is sent out after the webinar. So for those of you listening in a group today, whoever registered for the group will be the one that's receiving the evaluation link. Please make sure to forward that to everybody in the group, and if you're a member of the group, please ask the person to send you the link so that all of you can submit your evaluations. Please note for CEP-Cs you have 30 days, and for nursing you have 14 days to claim it. Now, actually, one thing I wanted to add real quick on the continuing education credits. Moving forward, starting with today's webinar, we're actually also going to be offering nursing credits for the on-demand recording of these webinars. So if you purchase a recording as well, those of your colleagues who will listen to the recording after this webinar can also get nursing credits along with CEP-C credits by listening to the recording and completing the evaluation form. So at this point, I am excited to introduce to you a fun team that's going to be presenting on this topic today. And they're going to take a little bit of a different approach in terms of presentation. So I'm super excited to this. So our talk show host for today is going to be Michelle Reef. And she is a member of our Get Connected webinar faculty and a regional manager for hospital development at Gift of Hope in Illinois. So I'm going to turn it to Michelle to introduce our speakers and then take it from there. Michelle?
Great. Thanks, Hetty. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to introduce our speakers today. They have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to donation and transplantation. So without further ado, our first speaker will be Kathi Soper. She's a nurse manager of adult critical care at Mercyhealth Hospital, Rockton Avenue in Rockford, Illinois. It's formerly known as Rockford Memorial Hospital. She's been with Mercyhealth for the last 8 years, and during that time, she has served as the Gift of Hope liaison. She has been a member of the Gift of Hope Mercyhealth Donation Committee for 8 years and has been instrumental in establishing best practice with organ and tissue donation. Formerly, Kit was with Mid-America as the Director of Critical Care and the liaison for SSM DePaul Hospital in St. Louis, and a member of the team that represented the hospital as part of the HRSA Organ Donation Breakthrough Collaborative, representing donor hospitals. Before her with Mid-America, she was at the University of Wisconsin as a manager of the Trauma and Life Support Center and a member of the HRSA Collaborative representing transplant centers. So welcome, Kit. Next, we have Jennifer Jalbert. Jen is a cardiothoracic surgery nurse for Mercyhealth Hospital, Rockton Avenue, and she's also the Gift of Hope OR liaison. Jennifer has worked consistently with Gift of Hope and improving processes and won the Gift of Hope Life-Saving Partner Award in 2015. She graduated from St. Anthony College of Nursing in 1999 and has been employed at Mercy Rockford since graduation. She then joined the surgical trauma team in 2002 and then was promoted to the cardiothoracic surgical team in 2004. Jennifer has been partnering with Gift of Hope for organ recovery since 2002 and started serving as the main OR liaison between Mercyhealth and Gift of Hope in 2013. So welcome, Jen. And last but not least, we have Kathi Steele. She received her bachelor's in nursing at OSF St. Francis College of Nursing in Peoria, Illinois, and received her master's in healthcare administration at St. Francis University, Joliet, Illinois. Currently certified as both an operating room nurse and a surgical services manager, Kathi has worked as a perioperative nurse for over 36 years in a wide variety of roles. She is actively engaged within the Association of Operating Room Nurses, and her current position is the Manager of Perioperative Education and Surgical Pre-Admission Center. So welcome everybody, and we will go ahead and get started. So as Hetty said, it'll be a question and answer session. And so first up will be Kit and Jen. And so Kit and Jen, could you tell me a little bit about Mercyhealth?
So Mercyhealth is formerly known as Rockford Memorial Hospital, and we are a level 1 trauma center in Rockford. We have 396 beds. 22 of those are in adult critical care. There's 14 OR suites, and then we also have a children's hospital with the only pediatric intensive care in Rockford and a level 3 neonatal intensive care unit.
Great. So it sounds like you have a wealth of experience with a variety of organ donation cases, and we've all heard that they start with early identification and referrals in the ICU. Can you tell us a little bit about your successful processes?
Yes, timely referral in our organization happens as early in the case as possible. I always say it's never too soon to call. What's good for the patient is good for the organs, and so it's not going to change our treatment plan to alert Gift of Hope early in the process if the patient might be a transplant or a donor candidate. I tell my team that it's kind of like consulting another service. It allows them to review the chart and prepare themselves so that if they are needed further along in the case and the care of that patient, that they're already aware and have reviewed the case. We also utilize Epic, and some of you may be familiar with the sticky note function. That is not a part of the permit record, but it gives us a place to communicate with each other that they are, in fact, aware of the patient so they aren't getting multiple calls, and also where we are in the process with the patient and their progress. The other thing it does is ensures everyone on the team is aware, especially if the person is a first-person authorization, because if anyone on the team, it prevents them from misspeaking if a family makes sort of a sudden decision that they have decided to withdraw support. Often what we'll see is they'll approach a member of the team and say, we're ready to pull the tube, and we don't want any member of the team saying, okay, we'll take care of that for you if we're going to proceed with the conversation about DCD.
Great. That sounds like some just well thought out practices that you guys have developed. What are some of the special considerations that critical care staff must account for that may not be present for brain death cases? Do you secure physicians?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to educate your team that in critical care, we withdraw support in the room and allow patients to comfortably pass away. And this is no different. It's just location. You need to do the same paperwork. It's a good time to approach the family about a funeral home. You want to make sure you've got your palliative order set, medications that you're going to need, and really make it a good experience for the family and a death with dignity. You also want to make sure you've got a physician that's willing to declare. This is another reason that we refer early. If we know we've got a physician on a team that may be conflicted about this or won't be available and be attending, we can make other arrangements so that at the last minute we're not scrambling for a physician that's willing to go to the OR.
Great. And then that seems like there's a lot of communication involved. So, I think we've all heard of the concepts of PCCs or patient care conferences or huddles, whatever terminology you might use. How does this apply in your cases, and how do you find them an important component?
Our huddles are essential to our success and the transitions through the process. Usually the OPO coordinator calls the initial huddle with the nurse, the OR liaison or nursing team, the manager if I'm available, and gives us a summary of the plan. They probably know how many family members wish to be present and who they are, whether they wish to have a pastor or chaplain with them, and also alert us to what timeline that we're looking at. The OR is critical also for their availability, and then I need to make plans for my staffing so that the nurse has no other patients and can accompany the patient to the operating room. After that initial huddle, we huddle often with any change in plan, any time changes with the OR, any delays with team arrival, any changes with the family. Every so often you will get a case where they have a deadline in mind for the process to occur, so we want to make sure to respect and honor that and be sensitive to their needs.
Okay, and then, so who can call these huddles?
Any member of the team can call the huddle, and it's usually the person that has a change of information or that just wants to huddle the team before a next step in a process. So right before we're transporting to the OR, our OR team comes to us. We have a huddle in the room to make sure we know exactly who's going, who will be with the family, if there's family coming, and who's going to help them get changed, and then make sure that the critical care nurse has ample medications that they're going to need and that the physician is available and aware that they need to be available for the next 90 minutes.
That sounds just like an excellent best practice. I think the audience hopefully will agree with that. So I understand you recently changed your DCD process. Can you explain a little bit about the process and what you used to have in place?
This is Jen. Recently, we've kind of decided to change things around based on really just respect for the patient and dignity. Our staff really had a hard time because we used to extubate either in the ICU or in the PACU, and then we'd have to do this very quick, abrupt whisking a family away and trying to get the patient to the OR in a timely manner to kind of decrease the cold ischemia time. It was very traumatic for the staff. It was very traumatic for the family. So we set up a policy basically to allow family members to be present in the OR. We would extubate in the OR and allow family to stay present with the patient until they expired. And it was seemed to be a lot more respectful. Families were very grateful to be present, and things just seemed to help make things a lot more smoother for everyone involved.
Okay. And then with the, you said the staff had a hard time with the process before. Can you elaborate on that? Did they come to you with concerns?
I myself really was involved in most of the DCDs. I felt a lot of anxiety about having to separate the family from now a patient who has expired, feeling stressed about getting the patient to the OR quickly for the trauma team. I also felt like I was essentially disrespecting my patient by abruptly, pulling them away from the family. That was hard for the staff to have to do that also. So that basically was coming down to respect for our patient.
Sure. Well, that's a very important part of the process for sure. So now that you've changed your process, what's been your staff's reaction to it?
It's positive. It's a lot less traumatic for the staff involved. A peaceful environment. Everyone is a little bit more relaxed. We don't feel like we're watching the clock. We're allowing our patient to have some dignity with a little bit more time to let the family say goodbye, and then allowed us a little bit more relaxation with prepping and draping and getting the transplant team in place quickly.
Okay. So with this current process you follow now in the extubation and the procurement in the same room, can you speak to some of the considerations that you had to allow for in changing this practice?
In the past, what we would do is we would have to secure 2 OR suites that were next to each other, and we would have to move the patient from one room to the next. So now we are doing everything in one room. We're cutting down on some contamination issues. We're able to prepare the family, prepare the OR. It's just a little bit more of a relaxed environment.
Perfect. And so then it sounds like you've got a very smooth process aligned. How do you keep it running smoothly?
That is where we rely on kits in the ICU with our huddles. We're talking at great lengths. I'm getting a feel for who the family is and what they're expecting. The ICU nurse is helping me explain to the family what to expect, talking to the family, explaining to them that once this patient has expired, it's very important that they're ready to leave. So they don't feel like last minute we're all of a sudden pushing them out. They understand why they need to leave quickly, the importance of preserving the gift.
And we also review with the family at that time what would happen if the patient doesn't pass away in the 90 minutes. And we reserve the room in the ICU that the patient left from, and also the nurse that accompanies them to the OR remains their nurse through the duration of their shift.
Wonderful. And what's been the feedback from the ICU nursing perspective of this change?
They really like the continuity of care, the fact that they can, usually have established a bond with that family and can say, I will be with you and with your loved one every step of the way. It really, I think in some ways, has improved our overall comfort with comfort care, whether that's in the OR or in our own environment, because we've collaborated with our palliative care team to come up with an order set so that there's no medications missed, no symptom management not anticipated, and it's really streamlined our processes to allow death with dignity in any location.
So how, can you speak to just some of the collaborative maybe meetings or communications you might have had with the Gift of Hope and how that partnership evolved to change this process?
Sure. Back when I joined Mercyhealth or Rockton campus, we had some bumps in the road with this process, and the organ donation committee had been formed prior to my arrival, and I joined that. It was supported by our chief nursing officer, and initially we met monthly to review any case, whether it was a brain death case or a DCD case. As we improved our processes and changed our policies, we meet less and less in a formal nature, because that committee involves multiple disciplines: social work, pastoral care, case management, respiratory therapy, pharmacy, the OR staff, the ICU team, PICU, everybody's at the table. We decided to move to a quarterly, and what we do instead is a debriefing. We do that either in person if there were complications or concerns, or we can do it by a conference call where everyone on the line is present and we can just celebrate our success. Our Gift of Hope also is wonderful about sending us information about which organs were able to be procured and thanking the team members and recognizing them for their role, which gives closure to everyone in the various teams.
Wonderful. It sounds like you have a great partnership. So, can you maybe just give one tip? What's the one tip you would give to any hospital and OPO partnership to make something so important as what these cases are, how they can make them smooth? Just one tip you could share?
For me, having a great partnership with the ICU, really it sets the pace for how the OR is going to go. I really rely on the ICU gals. They're really good about explaining the process to my family. They're the first step. They're starting to get the family prepared for you're going to have to go ahead and be ready to say goodbye as soon as your loved one has expired. They're already preparing the family for thinking about who's going to be present. Our policy states that we only allow 4 family members. So the ICU is already sort of setting the stage for me. So now when I come in, I'm going to go ahead and kind of retouch base on all those points. The family they're hearing so much that it's hard for them to really be able to take it all in. But I rely on the ICU pretty heavily, and we have to work as a team. Communication is the only thing that makes us successful. So by the time the patient reaches the OR, the family already knows what to expect. They're already prepared to leave rather quickly, and they understand why. And I feel that the families are feeling like they're being taken well cared for, because they're being made to be part of the team.
And to tag on to Jen's statement there, I think communication, having a key point person, one person that speaks for the OR and takes that feedback and processes back to their team, one from the ICU and one from the OPO, has been the key to the success here, and the relationships that we have built with each other. That's something I would strongly encourage other programs if you don't have that model. Doesn't have to be a manager, but it has to be an advocate who believes in donation, who is educated to explain to all members of the healthcare team why we do this and what the DCD process is.
I think it's also very important that there's communication with the OR staff. The ICU is familiar with extubating patients. They're familiar with patients that pass away. Many ORs, we do not see a lot of our patients pass away in the OR. A lot of our DCD cases have been a little bit traumatic, so the staff who aren't used to seeing a patient pass, depending on the type of injury that's led to this, an injury that's related to maybe a suicide or a hanging where a patient, is going to show some signs of a little bit of trouble passing, can be very traumatic for the OR. So we have a group of OR nurses that are better equipped to kind of deal with DCDs, and we try to respect our staff. And if a staff member feels they may not be comfortable, then we go ahead and we choose another member. We need to make sure that every member of our team is comfortable and they're going to be able to participate effectively.
Excellent. You have a lot of compassion, not only for the families, but for the staff, and should be very proud of the work you guys have done. It's just an excellent example of teamwork and partnership. So thank you for sharing that today. We're going to now switch over to Kathi, and Kathi is going to tell us a little bit about OSF St. Francis. So Kathi, can you just share a little bit about your hospital?
Sure. St. Francis Medical Center is located in Peoria, Illinois. It's the center of the state. We're part of an OSF healthcare system and one of 11 acute care hospitals. We also have the Children's Hospital, Level 1 Trauma Center, Neonatal Level 4 Trauma Center, and 629 or 630 licensed beds, depending on the day of the week. We have 30 operating rooms and probably another dozen procedural rooms in our hospital as well.
Great. And now, donation is a big part of the culture at your hospital. So can you just share a little bit at what point in the donation process are you contacted?
When I was part of the steering committee for Gift of Hope at the hospital, I would be text messaged probably 72 hours out or more, depending on what was going on with patients. So I had a heads up, and after authorization, we received emails to the management team and calls to the charge nurses at least 24 hours before we anticipated doing the procedure. So that was very helpful to us.
Great. The early communication, I think, is definitely key, as I hear both, from you and Jen and Kit. So you also, I understand, have a process that allows for family with their loved one for a DCD case. Can you describe that process a little bit to us?
Yes, we do. Our facility, we made a decision to only allow 2 members of the family to accompany the patient to the OR. Most of that was due to the size of our operating rooms. We have an older facility that we use, and in trying to allow for patients and their families to be in there, it was a little tight. So if we know that there's more than 2, we do make exceptions and we try and get a bigger room. But we, the ICU nurses and the Gift of Hope staff are very good at making sure that the families know what's going on and what to expect in the OR. And we don't have too much to have to tell them at that point in time. They're accompanied to the OR after their loved one has been in the OR, and we're draped and prepped and ready to go. And the area is draped off so that they really can't see anything, but we make sure that the patient is accessible to them so that they have access to their hand if they want to hold their hand or their shoulder or their head. And of course the ICU nurses are right there with them as well, providing comfort to that family member. And they're there after extubation, and then they say their goodbyes, and then they're escorted out. Just after a few minutes, they know that it's important to leave, and then once they're gone, then our teams come in from the other room, and we begin.
Great. That sounds like a very well thought out process. What kind of tools or resources or checklists maybe do you use to ensure that you're adequately set up for an organ procurement case?
We have our preference lists, of course, for each of the surgeons or the teams, because we've gotten to know many of the visiting teams, and we could develop those checklists. We have received pictures from some of the teams. On the screen there, you'll see the shots of the Mayo stands that are set up, and that's basically our complete setup that we've worked with other teams to develop and standardize. It makes it much easier, and each team knows what to expect.
Excellent. Checklists, I think, can be extremely helpful in cases, just so, they're so important to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed, especially when family are involved. With doing some of these processes, it seems like healthcare simulation is a big component of that. Can you tell us a little bit about how that might have been a valuable tool for you guys and some simulation projects you might have been involved in?
So when we were approached about 4 years ago to begin the family presence in the OR for DCDs, we thought everybody was crazy, and we didn't think this was possible at all. We had a lot of resistance with the surgical staff because you just don't do that. After some education and some thought put together, we came up with a simulation process where we had every single person you could think of who would touch that patient involved in simulation, and I mean every single person. We began one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we're out of the OR by 6:30. We went through the complete bringing the patient from the ICU all the way through the process into the OR, extubating the patient, declaring them dead, and the family member saying goodbye, and then throughout the whole process. And we filmed all of that. So then after that process, we were able to look at that video and decide what went well and what didn't go quite so well, and then we could adjust our plans. And we've been adjusting ever since, and it's gone very well. My advice for simulation is include every single person. We received volunteers from our volunteer pool who acted as the family members, and I'm telling you, it was quite an experience. The physician who was acting the declaring physician almost cried when they interacted with this patient, our dummy patient on the table. So it was very good, and they simulated it all very well. We've provided, after the simulation, we developed a video for our OR staff for education, because we had to drape the patient just a little different than you normally would on a normal transplant patient or procurement patient without family in the room. So it's a good thing.
So Kathi, you mentioned that videotaping the simulation was extremely helpful, and you changed a few things. You just spoke about the draping changes. Was there anything else that you changed as a result of watching the video, or any other learning opportunities?
The timing of bringing the family in the room, I think, is critical, and we looked at that, and we did it a couple of different ways, or thought about it a couple of different ways before we decided on the family not coming in until after extubation. And we bring them in, and I think they're much better prepared that way than watching someone extubate their loved one and saying goodbye then. So we did make that change.
So I've always heard that when you do a simulation that the learning goes on in the debriefing part of it. Can you speak to maybe some of the things that came out of a debriefing, or any other types of debriefings you might do as a team?
We debrief anytime we try to debrief on every case to see what went right, what went wrong. We fill out an evaluation form from Gift of Hope, and that goes forward to your organization. We have addressed behavior issues that way. We have addressed supply issues that way. One of our biggest learning opportunities came when we had a visiting team not understand what we were doing, and we were all set. This was probably maybe number 2 or number 3 of our DCDs with family, and they came in and wanted everything turned around. The entire room turned around, the entire setup. They didn't like what we did. So we identified that we had a big education gap there. We did all this simulation and work, and we thought we were good to go, and we forgot to tell the visiting teams what we were doing. So we did resolve that issue, and what came of it are those pictures that you saw earlier in the slides, the standardized Mayo stand setups for instrumentation. So we both benefited from it.
Excellent. I think communication in the debriefing sometimes is, the best learning tool, and so it sounds like you learned quite a bit as a result of those. With the process of obtaining comfort meds, I know that Kit and Jen spoke about a palliative care order set. How do you manage the medication for comfort meds between the ICU and the OR?
Our charge nurse in the OR contacts the ICU to find out which nurse will be taking care of this patient when they come to the OR, and we actually add their name to our computerized medication dispensing unit, our Pyxis machine, and they have access to our machine for like 14 hours of temporary access. So then all the drugs stay in our unit. They're not transported between the ICU unit and our unit, and so there's no chance of losing anything.
Okay. Sounds like a good process. You would not want to lose those for sure. When you are doing an OR case, I've heard that some hospitals and teams have done things to honor the patient, honor the gift of donation. Is that something that you do at your institution, and can you speak to that if so?
We do. I understand that there is a timeout up in the unit. They do that up in the ICU before they transport. And then again, once we get to the operating room, after the family members have left, we do Gift of Hope does a timeout, and they come with a story about a patient. And I'd like to share one, if you don't mind. And this is an example of something that was read just prior to the incision being made on a donor patient. Stephen was a beloved son and brother who lived in central Illinois most of his life. He was currently unable to work due to his medical conditions, but when he was able, he worked in a factory that manufactured insulated pipes to be used in nuclear power plants. He and his father also helped a friend work on his farm and enjoyed life in rural America. Stephen is the oldest of 3 children. His sister has a very special relationship with him because she was the baby of the family, and Stephen picked out her name when she was born. He never married, but had many close friends and loved spending time with his family. Steve enjoyed the simple things in life, like reading the paper, doing crossword puzzles, and spending time with family. His parents will miss his loving personality and sense of humor. He will forever be remembered in the lives of those who loved him. These messages are very impactful for the staff. They really appreciate knowing a little bit about this person before they give their gift of life.
Absolutely powerful, and I can see how that can absolutely set the stage and just put things in perspective when we're dealing with life and death as we are in these cases. So thank you for sharing that with us. After organ recovery cases are completed, I would imagine that feedback is maybe collected somehow. Do you have a process to communicate feedback?
We try to debrief after every case, and when they're especially difficult, for instance, children, it's really hard on a lot of the staff members. We do try to put staff members in those rooms that are okay with it, that they can deal with that. We had not too long ago, I believe we had a 9-year-old who was a donor, and I believe she was celebrating, you'll have to help me remember, she was celebrating her birthday, her grandfather's birthday, and so they celebrated that with putting balloons out there by the donor flag outside in front of the hospital. And that was the way the family had to cope with that, her death. And that was good. It was hard for the staff in the OR because of her age, I think. And we allow those people to come together and talk, and we talk through them with the charge nurses and try and debrief and see what else we could have done to make it easier.
Yeah, I think those are great resources to be able to offer the staff when dealing with just some of those very tough cases, emotional cases that maybe hit very personally for staff members. So I understand that you do a large volume of cases, maybe around 30 organ recoveries a year. Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips on how to run a smooth recovery case for hospitals that may not encounter a large volume?
Sure. I think the most important thing is the communication. It's the key. Communication between Gift of Hope and the charge nurse and all the team players. Usually that is our communication point person is Gift of Hope. When we know how many teams are coming, when we know what the organs are being procured, we can try and plan or shoot for those rooms when they open. We're a very busy center, and sometimes it's really difficult to get a room. So when we know all the details, it's easier for us to do that. We keep our preference list updated so that if you haven't done a procurement in 2 or 3 years, you can read on it, and you should be able to do the case very well. We debrief at every opportunity, and most of our cases are done on the PM or night shift, and we have staff that work those shifts all the time. So we have like 4 surgical techs on PMs and 2 surgical techs at night. So they become very familiar with the visiting teams, and they know what to expect. So that does help a lot, the familiarity.
Great. So a familiar team. So let's say, even though you said it's a very busy OR, let's say for some reason there was an OR case that gets to be scheduled in the middle of the afternoon, and it's not a team so familiar with donation. Do you have any advice or any strategies to use for teams that don't see donation as much?
We have all of our information on our portal as well, and we can pull it up and review that as they go along. And we do try and change out our staff, we'll have somebody come in and precept somebody through the case if they've never done it before, or just change up what we're doing.
Fabulous. Good resources to have. So I think that we are going to turn it over to some questions. Hetty, do you want to remind everybody what they can do to ask a question?
Thank you so much, ladies, for a fantastic presentation and for really sharing some really valuable insights. For those of you who are listening in and have probably some questions for any of our speakers today, please go ahead and submit your questions. We cannot unmute the line, so you just need to type in your question into that chat box on the bottom left-hand corner, and then we will be able to moderate it from this end. So while we have the questions going on, I have a poll that I have put up right now. And for those of you who are listening in a group, if you could be so kind to just put in on the poll how many people are in your group, and I will turn it back to Michelle to moderate the questions.
Great. Thanks, Hetty. So we do have a couple questions. The first one is from Kim, and she would like to know from the speakers how many families are hesitant to withdraw in the OR due to the limited amount of members you allow in the OR. So Jen or Kit or Kathy, would you like to answer?
This is Kathy. Since I have the fewer number, I believe we allow 2 normally. I have had many, many phone calls asking for more than 2, and I don't believe we have ever turned them down. I think the most we've ever had is 4, and that seems to be probably the number that most people would have. So that may be why Rockford has 4.
Kit and Jen, would you like?
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
I think we've never really had a problem going above the 4. I think one case we actually allowed a 5th because it was they had a lot of adult children. Usually, basically, whoever's kind of taken charge of the family picks who's going to go. I think they're just grateful to come along, and there's usually always a few members that just aren't comfortable with the process. We have pretty strict policy, but this is something that we would bend a little bit on.
Okay, so it sounds like, just in summary, that you guys are flexible, that you have some policies, but they can be exceptions to the rule. So it sounds like nobody's been turned away. So good question, Kim. Thank you. Liz has a question, and it says, her question is in regards to emotional fatigue. Although the intention of the donor acknowledgement is great, at times it can add stress or emotional burnout to the OR team who may need a little less personal message. Being emotionally attached to the case is important based on the role. Often the operating team can balk at adding the emotion to the room. So it's, have you guys had any experience or any feedback about, those being read and being a little bit too much?
This is Kathy. I have not. I've had actually the opposite reaction from staff. They really like hearing more about the patient, and they come and tell me all about them when they're done. So my staff at St. Francis really likes that.
This is Jen. At Rockford, I feel like when we started adding the personal message, it really brought back the patient as a person. In the OR, it's very easy to be separated, and I think that helps us a little bit sometimes on these more difficult cases because we don't have a personal connection with the patient, especially when they're a child. I know I always kind of choke up a bit when I hear my patient's story. I personally love it, and a lot of my staff that have struggled with doing the DCD cases, I feel like it's brought a lot more support. I have more volunteers that are a little bit more comfortable to participate now. Just kind of brings everything back together, why we're here and what this is for. I think it's been very positive.
Excellent. Thank you for the comments on that. So Lucia has a question. Earlier you mentioned that you used 2 ORs. Why is that? So I believe, Kathy, you talked about the 2 ORs.
I'm sorry. Okay, 2 ORs. Once we're set up in the OR where the patient is and we're going to do the procurement, we have our team go into another OR just to be ready to go. And that's why we use 2 ORs.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. Kate has an interesting question. This is, she wants to know, how do you handle conversations with physicians who may not want family members present in the OR? Have any of you encountered that?
And we've never. All of our teams are pretty flexible with going by whatever the OR is dictating. they pretty much want to be a little bit more hands-off when it comes to family interaction. They're more a part of the final process, and they're not involved in what decisions have already been made with family interaction.
I think that we had one occurrence where, due to unfortunate timing, the family was brought down the hall while the surgeon was scrubbing his hands, and he kind of felt like it's probably not the best place for him to be. But other than that, we really haven't had any conversations that they don't want the family there.
Great. So Andrea has a question about how many centers use esophageal stethoscope, and will you elaborate on how it's used?
The esophageal stethoscope is placed by the declaring physician and is connected to, it's a disposable stethoscope that we use in anesthesia, and it's connected to the end of a regular stethoscope handle. Does that make sense? And they can listen to the heartbeat through that. Did I answer that question?
Yep. So thank you for clarifying. Okay. And so James has the next question, and he said, thanks for the presentation. When the donor comes to the OR with personal items, what is the process of getting those items back to the family or funeral home, i.e. picture, blanket, or jersey?
This is Jen. A lot of our pediatric patients have come to the OR with either toys or blankets. My most recent cloth was given to the mother, and then an identical cloth was given to the child. I placed that cloth in the child's hand. I covered his hand with a surgical glove and secured it, and then I also left a note for that glove to stay intact to the funeral home so it would stay with the child. I also had another pediatric patient that had a race car in his hand, and all the OR nurses know how we feel about metal with our patients. So with him, I had to do a little bit more work, wrapping his hand with a lot of gauze, things like that. Something like that, I will definitely follow a family's wishes to keep a personal item with the child especially.
Great. Thank you for answering that. Our next question comes from Diane, and she wants to know, what was the age of the youngest family member allowed into the OR to say their goodbye? Do either of you have any processes or age limitations on that, or come across that?
I don't think we've come across that yet.
We have not had any children request to be in the OR. I think we would probably have to leave that up to family. We just haven't come across that yet.
Okay. So another question comes from Liz, and Liz wants to know, do your hospitals have to report a death in the OR, or is this reported as an ICU death? Either of you come across that?
Are you referring to like a coroner when a patient dies in the OR unexpectedly where you have to report it? Can you clarify the question?
Let's see if clarify. I'm assuming it's maybe for the DCDs when they're extubated and the time of death is in the OR. Is there any obligation to report it one way or the other?
I don't think so.
I think this is related to commonly hospitals have the question of, or ORs have the concern because you have to report the number of OR deaths that you have on normal surgeries, if this would be counted as an OR death. I think that's what the question is.
No, it's not counted for us.
I don't think so.
More.
Okay. Thanks, Hetty, for clarifying. Oh, yep. Liz acknowledged that's exactly what she was looking for. So, okay. And then Kim is wanting to know if we can have identify a contact from Gift of Hope to share their evaluation with us. Hetty, can we email information to Kim? Is that,
yep.
We have her information?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay. So Kim, if you're still listening, we'll get you a contact. And then are there any further questions, or while we're waiting to see if we have any more questions, is there any last comments or thoughts, Kit or Jen or Kathi?
We'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to share our experiences with you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for that. I don't see any more questions coming in, but I think you gave us all just a lot to think about, some different processes, you know, starting from when that referral comes in through the ICU and even after donation's complete, and really just honing in on your processes and making them better, and just keeping the patient and the family at the forefront of the process has been just tremendous work by both of your institutions. So I do thank you guys for your time and sharing all of this.
Yes, I want to echo the same. Thank you to all of you for your time and for sharing your expertise. I think there's a lot of very valuable and very practical information as well for all of the participants. I want to thank all of you who dialed in to listen today and share your time with us as well. Thank you for spending that time. And just as a reminder, I'm sure some of you are thinking, oh, how do I get that recording again? Because this obviously had a lot of great information, and probably information you might want to share with hospitals as well. So if your organization doesn't already receive a recording, you can go to our Alliance website under the Alliance Academy, which you can find under Education. So there is actually one more question that just came through in the queue. So I'll just let you moderate that real quick here, Michelle.
Sure. So James is asking, is it possible to share the simulation of the DCD process with the group? And the answer actually would be yes. We do have videos of the one Kathi did at St. Francis. There's a short video and then a longer version, and we'd be happy to share the YouTube video links with the group.
That actually poses a bold request from me as well. We do have an organ donation toolbox on our website that houses great resources for organ procurement organizations and hospitals. So if you're willing to share any of your checklists in relation to the DCD process, how you handle families, any policy examples, or those videos if they're on YouTube and you're comfortable with us sharing that, just linking it to our site, please consider that. We would love to receive more additions to the toolbox to kind of make it a great resource for everybody in the community. So thank you all so much for your time. Michelle, thank you for your moderation. And I'm going to close out the webinar. Wish everybody a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.